The robocall said, "Press 1 to keep your Medicare benefits active." 15 minutes later, a stranger had everything they needed to become me on paper. That sentence kept replaying in my mind as I stood in my quiet kitchen, staring at the blinking red light on the landline. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of slow, ordinary day when the loudest sound in the house was the refrigerator humming. I just rinsed my coffee cup when the phone rang again, sharp and insistent, cutting through the stillness. Unknown number. Again. I let it ring and felt that familiar pinch in my chest. The calls had been coming for weeks, sometimes 3 or 4 a day. Always the same flat voice saying my Medicare card was about to expire, that I needed a new upgraded card with a security chip, that it was urgent I respond. Each word landed like a tap on a bruise. Urgent, expire, upgrade. Like they were telling me I was outdated, running out, about to be cut off. I thought about unplugging the phone. Then the worry hit. What if it was the doctor, the pharmacy, or one of my kids? They're busy. They text more than they call. But still, I didn't want to miss something real because of something fake. That thought hurt in a different way. It made me feel trapped between being careful and being careless, with no safe middle. The phone rang again. Same number, same local area code that made it look familiar, like someone down the road instead of a machine from nowhere. That little trick stung. It felt like someone putting on my neighbor's face just to step through my front door. This time, I picked up. "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. The recorded voice started immediately, smooth and official. "This is an important message regarding your Medicare benefits. Your current Medicare card is scheduled to be deactivated due to new security chip requirements. To avoid interruption of your benefits, please press 1 now. Deactivated, avoid interruption." Each phrase went straight for the most fragile part of me, my fear of losing the one system I rely on to stay healthy. I have high blood pressure and a knee that complains every time the weather changes. The idea that some computer somewhere could flip a switch and leave me alone with my pills and my bills made my throat tighten. I told myself it sounded official. They used the word Medicare. They talked about security. They used the same kind of language I've seen in letters with government seals and tiny print. At the same time, a quiet part of me whispered that real things usually come on paper, not in a robotic voice. That small warning voice made me feel almost guilty, like I was being suspicious of someone who was just trying to help. "Press 1 now," the recording repeated, a little firmer. That line hit differently. It made me feel like a child being ordered to obey before I had time to think. "Press 1 now," like I couldn't be trusted to pause, read, or decide, like I was just a finger on a button. I pressed 1. There was a click, a pause, and then a live person came on the line. His voice was warm and friendly, polished in that familiar customer service way. "Thank you for holding, ma'am. I'm with the Medicare Benefits Department. I see your file here. We're updating cards with new security chips so you don't lose coverage. How are you today?" How are you today? The question sounded gentle, but it stung. He didn't know me. He didn't know the ache in my knee, or how I sometimes sleep in the recliner because it's easier than climbing into bed, or how the house has felt too quiet since my husband passed. Yet he said it like we had a connection, like he cared. It felt like someone using the language of concern as a tool, and it made me feel foolish and exposed at the same time. "I'm fine, I guess," I said, and I hated how eager I sounded, like I was grateful a stranger had asked. "That's good to hear, ma'am," he said smoothly. "We just need to verify a few details so your benefits aren't interrupted. We don't want you to lose anything you've earned. We don't want you to lose anything you've earned." That line went straight to a soft place in me. I thought about all the years I worked, late nights, double shifts, aching feet. I thought about raising kids, paying taxes, doing everything the right way. Hearing those words, it felt like he was protecting all of that for me. And yet another part of me wondered, if this is real, why the rush? Why the repeat calls? Why the fear? I ignored that small voice because the bigger feeling was panic. Panic about coverage, panic about being too late, panic about losing something I depend on. And under that panic was something sharper. The sting of being treated like I was easy to push around just because I'm older and alone. So I listened. He asked for my Medicare number to confirm the correct card, and I read it off slowly, my fingers trembling as I traced the numbers with my thumb. Perfect, he said. Thank you, ma'am. Perfect stung. Like I'd done a good job handing him something private. Like I was a student who'd finally answered a hard question right, when really I was opening a door I couldn't see. Then he asked for the last 4 digits of my social security number. Just the last 4, he said. Calm as anything, just. That little word bothers me now. At the time it sounded reasonable, like he was doing me a favor by not asking for the whole thing. Now it feels like the word he used to step past my guard. I gave him the 4 digits, and each one felt like a small piece of my life sliding away. He asked me to confirm my address for shipping the new chipped card. I gave him my street, my city, my zip code, my home, my safe place. With every detail, it felt like I was pulling back the curtains for someone who had no right to stand there. He thanked me again and told me my benefits were now secure. He wished me a blessed day. Secure. Blessed. He wrapped his lie in gentle words, and I let it in because I wanted to believe someone was finally looking out for me. After I hung up, I stood at the sink for a long moment, holding the dish towel like it was the only thing keeping my hands steady. The kitchen looked the same, my little calendar on the wall, the bottle of dish soap, the mail I hadn't sorted. But inside me, something had shifted. Not enough to scream, not enough to cry, just enough that I felt watched, like I'd opened a window and didn't know who was outside. For the next few days, I kept waiting for proof that I had done the right thing. I checked the mailbox like a child waiting for a birthday card. I watched for a new envelope, a new Medicare card, anything that would make the anxiety settle. Nothing came. At night, when the phone rang and I saw unknown, my stomach would jump. I started letting more calls go to voicemail, but the pressure didn't stop. The same robotic message, the same urgent language, over and over. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It felt personal, like a hand tapping the same tender spot until it bruised deeper. I told myself I should mention it to my daughter, but then I didn't. Part of me didn't want to sound paranoid. Another part of me didn't want the lecture I could already hear. Mom, you can't trust random calls. The idea of being scolded for trying to protect myself made me resentful in a quiet way. I'd spent my whole life keeping things running, showing up, working, handling what needed to be handled. Why did it feel like the moment I got older, the world expected me to be both responsible and helpless at the same time? Months passed. The call drifted into the background. I waited for a new card that never came, but I didn't push it. Mail is slow sometimes, I told myself. Maybe it would show up in the next stack of envelopes. Then one afternoon, a thick envelope arrived from Medicare. I sat at the kitchen table, put on my reading glasses, and opened it. The heading said Medicare Summary Notice, like it always does, but the list underneath didn't look like my life. There were charges for knee surgery I never had, a hospital stay in a city I've never visited, medical equipment I've never seen, wheelchairs, braces, treatments, my name printed neatly next to each line as if I'd asked for all of it. Seeing my name there felt like being slapped. It was my name, my number, my history. But the story on that page was a lie. The phrase services you received hurt because it made it sound like I'd taken something I didn't take. It made me feel guilty for something I hadn't done. And you may be billed sat there like a polite threat. I could hear his voice again. We don't want you to lose anything you've earned. Now it sounded like a joke at my expense. He hadn't protected anything. He'd used my trust to open the door for fraud in my name. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the feeling that my life, my body, my medical history, had been copied and rearranged by someone who didn't know me and didn't care if I existed beyond a screen. Like I was just a number they could borrow for a while. I sat in the quiet kitchen with papers spread out, the fridge humming, my hands still. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The hurt settled in my chest like a weight, and under it was a cold, clear understanding. This wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal. A few days later, I brought the papers to my friend Diane at the community center. We've known each other for years through church, and she used to work in medical billing. If anyone could read these pages, it was her. My hands shook as I slid the envelope onto the table. She put on her glasses, scanned the charges, and her expression tightened. These aren't errors, she said. This looks like fraud. Medical identity theft. Medical identity theft. The words made my face heat up, humiliation mixed with anger. Identity theft always sounded like credit cards and bank accounts. Medical made it feel more personal. They weren't just after money, they were writing a false version of my body, my health, my life. Diane circled provider names. Have you ever been to this clinic? She asked. No, I said. The clinic name sounded official, but I'd never even been near that city. We should call, she said, right now. We stepped into the hallway. Diane called one of the numbers and put it on speaker. A receptionist answered, cheerful and rushed. Diane explained that we were looking at charges under my name for services I never received. The receptionist paused and then said, well, ma'am, our records show those services were provided. Maybe you just don't remember every appointment. Maybe you just don't remember. That sentence cut deep. She didn't say old, but I heard it anyway. It reminded me of being dismissed in a sweet tone, like my reality was automatically less reliable. I swallowed hard and said, I do remember. I did not go to your clinic, not once. The receptionist replied, if you have concerns, you can take it up with Medicare, but our documentation is in order. In order. That phrase made me furious. They cared more about tidy paperwork than the truth. Polite words used to push me away, just like the polite words that had pulled me in. After we hung up, Diane looked at me and said firmly, this is not your imagination. You didn't cause this, but you do need to fight it. Her saying that shifted something inside me. I'd been blaming myself for pressing one, for wanting to believe the voice on the phone. Now I could see the larger truth. Someone had targeted me on purpose. They used fear and flattery like tools. My mistake was trusting. Their action was wrong. That thought turned my shame outward into energy. That afternoon, I went home, opened a fresh notebook, and wrote down every false charge, every clinic, every date. I looked up addresses and phone numbers. Some were real offices. One was basically a mailbox in a strip mall. Seeing that made my anger feel clean, not messy. This wasn't complicated, it was wrong. And then something else hit me, something that made my stomach drop even more. If those claims were in my record, they could follow me. A new doctor might see knee surgery and assume I had complications. They might avoid a medication, prescribe something wrong, or miss something important because the chart told a story that wasn't mine. It wasn't just bills, it was my health, my future, getting distorted by a lie. That night, I slept badly. I kept imagining walking into an emergency room someday and being asked about a surgery I never had. Ma'am, it says right here. And then that same tone again, the tone that implies the problem is my memory, not their paperwork. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open, the Medicare summaries spread out, and my phone placed in the middle like a tool, not a threat. I called 1-800-Medicare and listened to the menu until I heard the option for fraud. When a representative came on, she asked for my name, my Medicare number, my date of birth. I gave the information slowly, then I told her plainly there were surgeries and equipment billed in my name that I never received. At first she said something like, these things sometimes happen when beneficiaries share information with third parties. The distance in her wording irritated me. These things, beneficiaries, as if my life was just a file. But I stayed calm and explained the robocall, the security chip, the man who claimed he was from the Medicare benefits department. As the details became clear, her tone changed. She opened a fraud report, gave me a case number, and asked me to list each suspicious charge. Reading them out loud felt like naming each bruise. When she said, "We'll flag your record and investigate these providers," I felt a small, sharp satisfaction. The same system they'd tried to use against me was now turning to look back at them. She told me I could request a new Medicare number to replace the compromised one. It may take some time, she said. That annoyed me. The theft took minutes, the repair would take weeks, but requesting a new number still felt like closing a door they'd walked through too easily. I agreed and wrote down every instruction. After that, I filed a report at identitytheft.gov. The questions were clear: what happened, when, how my information was used. For the first time in months, the words on a screen didn't make me feel small. They gave me somewhere to put the details I'd been carrying in my chest. I printed the report and added it to my growing folder. Then I called my daughter. I didn't do it because I wanted sympathy. I did it because I realized secrecy is exactly what makes these things worse. The scammers want you isolated, embarrassed, quiet. When she answered, I said, I need you to listen, and I need you not to scold me. My voice shook, but it was steady enough to hold. There was silence, then a softer tone. Okay, Mom, I'm listening. I told her what happened, the robocall, the pressure, the Medicare number, the last 4 digits, the fake claims. When I finished, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. I'm so sorry, she said, and the apology surprised me. Not because she shouldn't be sorry, but because I had braced myself for blame. Thank you for telling me. We're going to deal with it. We talked about practical steps, how I'd already called Medicare, how I'd filed the identity theft report, how I'd started a folder. Then she said something that made my resentment flare just for a second. We should also check your credit report, Mom. Sometimes they try to open other things too. The idea that this could spill into my credit made me feel tired and angry at the same time. Angry at the people who started it, tired that fixing it would take effort I never asked to spend. But I nodded even though she couldn't see me, and we did it. She walked me through how to request the reports and how to place a credit freeze. It felt strange, like locking every door in the house after realizing one had been open. That evening, I started calling my doctors, when my primary care office said, almost casually, our system shows you had knee surgery at an outside facility. Is that correct? I felt my anger spike. Those words came from a computer, but they carried the weight of someone else's lie. I said firmly, no, that is false. I'm working with Medicare to correct my record. Please note that in my chart. To my surprise, my doctor called me back later and said, thank you for telling us. We'll add a notice to your record and be careful with any outside information. Her tone was calm, but I heard real respect in it. It eased some of the sting. Still, I couldn't forget that for a while, my chart had been telling a story that wasn't mine. Clinic by clinic, I worked through the list. Some offices were helpful, some were vague. A few tried to dismiss me with that same polished line. Our documentation is in order. Every time I heard it, I wrote down the name, the date, the exact words. I added it to my folder alongside the Medicare case number and the identity theft report. One call in particular stuck with me. A billing manager said, Ma'am, if it went through Medicare, it means the services were rendered. Like the system itself was proof. Like a form was more believable than a living person sitting at her own kitchen table. I felt my resentment tighten into something hard and clean. I said, then your system has been lied to. And I'm documenting this call. There was a pause after that, thicker than silence, the kind that means someone has finally heard they're not talking to an easy target. I wasn't doing any of this out of revenge. I wanted something simpler than that. My name back, my record clean, my peace restored, and as I looked at the stack of papers, organized, labeled, real, I felt a quiet kind of power. The people who used my information still didn't know my face, but now they had something they couldn't see either. A trail of facts moving through the same channels they abused. It didn't happen overnight. It took letters, calls, and more waiting than I liked. Some days I felt like all I did was sit on hold, repeating my story to another polite voice, and sometimes those voices sounded almost annoyed, like my life had become an inconvenience on their schedule. But one afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived from Medicare that felt different the moment I picked it up. Thin, not stuffed with pages of false charges. At the kitchen table, I opened it carefully. The letter said their review was complete. The fraudulent claims were being removed. The providers were under investigation. The language was formal, but one line hit me like relief. You are not responsible for these charges. My chest loosened. Then my resentment flared at the next sentence. We regret any inconvenience this may have caused. Inconvenience. Months of worry, hours on the phone, nights staring at the ceiling, and they called it inconvenience. But their soft word didn't change the truth. The bills were reversed, the record was being corrected, and for once it was in writing. Not long after, I got a letter from one of the shady clinics saying they found no evidence of wrongdoing and that all services were billed appropriately. I didn't argue with the paper. I slid it into my fraud file behind the Medicare notice and my reports. If they wanted to pretend nothing happened, that was their choice. I had proof that said otherwise. Over time, my folder grew thick. I kept it in a bright plastic envelope where I could see it easily. Inside were Medicare notices, notes from every call, letters from doctors confirming corrections, and printouts from identitytheft.gov. I called it my medical fraud file. Just knowing it was there steadied me. It was my record of what happened and how I didn't let it swallow me. One evening, my phone buzzed with an email from a woman I didn't know. She wrote, "I saw your story and checked my mother's Medicare papers. We found charges for tests she never had. Because of what you shared, we reported it. Thank you. Thank you." 2 words with no trick inside them, no pressure, no dismissal, just gratitude. It cut through my anger like a small light. After that, I started talking about what happened. At the community center after exercise class, at church potlucks, even at the pharmacy when the topic came up. I told people to open every Medicare summary notice, even when they were tired. I showed them how to look for services you didn't receive. I told them real Medicare won't call out of nowhere and threaten to cut off benefits unless you press a button. I wrote down 1-800-MEDICARE for anyone who asked. I explained identitytheft.gov and how to report identity theft. I told them to let unknown numbers go to voicemail and not to press anything. I also changed my own habits. I set one spot for Medicare mail and checked it weekly. I kept a small notebook of doctor visits and prescriptions so I could compare paper to real life. I installed call blocking and let unknown numbers ring out. And when a robocall slipped through with urgent Medicare updates, I hung up and reported the number. The resentment hasn't vanished. When I think about that first call, his calm voice, his "we don't want you to lose anything you've earned," I still feel a hard knot of anger. Those polite lies left a mark. The calls didn't just steal information, they tried to steal my confidence in my own judgment. They tried to turn my fear of losing healthcare into a leash. But I don't live inside that anger anymore. It's part of my story, not the whole thing. Tonight, my house is quiet in a way that feels different. The fraud file sits closed on the coffee table. I'm not waiting for the next bad letter. I'm not checking the phone every hour. I know my record is cleaner, my number is safer, and my voice is stronger than it was when this began. If you're listening and any part of this feels familiar, don't ignore that feeling. Check your statements. Question the nice voices on the phone. Protect your name before someone else writes their story with it. And if you want a simple rule that would have saved me, it's this. If a call scares you and rushes you, stop. Hang up. Call back using a number you already trust. Your doctor's office, your plan, Medicare itself. Fear makes people fast. Safety makes people slow. Share this with someone you care about, because the more of us who know, the fewer of us they can turn into a number.